Greetings and salutations. Despite the fact that I am wearing his merch, this is not Bandit's Keep, and I am indeed not Daniel. However, I decided I want to do another video today, something that's more in my wheelhouse. I'm here to talk about today. So it's that time of year again, right? We start seeing some Halloween decorations being put out, children dressing up as monsters or characters, going out into the streets and asking for candy, and we hear the campfire stories of urban legends or even some old folklore being brought to the more modern era. It's just that time of year again, and people love it. And I'm honestly no exception. I love scary movies. I love scary books. I love spooky, scary skeletons that send shivers down your spine. I love that kind of stuff. It's that time of year again, of course, in our little hobby where uh, grognards pull dust off Ravenloft and they play uh, either in their old AD&D first edition games or in their respective retro clones. More modern players might dust off the Curse of Strahd module adventure and run that, and some people come up with homebrew, and people run their games from what they found online, just as a quick thing, normally one shots, but some people like to put it in their long term campaigns, especially if you are a homebrewer. So, let's say you're a homebrewer and you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. You want to come up with something that's totally yours. I can help. So, the reason I say that I can help is not necessarily because I possess the hubris that I know more than anybody else. I don't. This is just simply, as I stated before, more in my wheelhouse. I can make pretty passable bandit hideouts. I can make convincing orc lairs. I can come up with pretty satisfying knoll camps. But really, where I excel at most of all is in terms of coming up with undead hideouts. Now, aboleths are a little outside of my wheelhouse. I love cosmic horror. Nothing wrong with cosmic horror. It's just not what I deal with. And in fact, if I was going to run a cosmic horror game, I would try to get Call of Cthulhu or an equivalent to it, rather than trying to make it fit a Dungeons and Dragons or Castles and Crusades or basic fantasy or white box style game. Be that as it may, most of my games are more akin to more swords and sorcery. However, this can actually fit within a more higher fantasy setting as well. Now, it's a little bit, some people kind of yawn about it in like a 5th edition campaign. You're mistaken. And this is why. I think you're mistaken because mostly when it comes to Forgotten Realms, the campaign setting is in such a way that it's kind of mundane to see a skeleton get up and walk around. It's almost expected that if you go into a crypt, everything's going to get up and shuffle around and try to attack you. And that shouldn't be the case. Because even when we take the most prolific high fantasy author of all time, J.R.R. Tolkien, even his world, undead were very rare and were the result of very dark, black, corrupted magic. Even when we talk about The Hobbit, for example, there's this scene in the first chapter where the dwarves are gathered around the table, and it's after dinner, and Bilbo's all huffy and puffy because they've made a mess and this, that, and everything else, and he hasn't figured it out yet, but he's being signed up for something that he didn't necessarily agree to. But Gandalf pulls out a map and a key. Thorin's asking, "Where did you get this?" And so Gandalf explains, "I got this when I met your father in the dungeons of the Necromancer." And at that very mention, the dwarves all shudder. The idea of a necromancer is repulsive to them. And indeed, the undead do feature more, especially in Lord of the Rings, but they're very rare to come by. It's not like they're getting up and walking around and all over the place. The fact that they get up, it challenges the worldview of a lot of the people in the setting, and especially the hobbits, especially when they go to, they get attacked by the Barrow Wight. So like that in and of itself is kind of a spooky little part of the chapter. many people don't know about because they've only got their interaction with Tolkien through the Peter Jackson films, which are excellent films, but they have left out quite a lot, which is why I prefer the books more than the movies. Be that as it may, whether we're talking about low swords and sorcery style fantasy or whether we're talking about high fantasy, where there's a lot of magic at play, we should set our undead up in such a way that it challenges the worldview of the players and the NPCs. Because after all, the above ground world is not familiar with any of the fantastical, or they shouldn't be. So let's put it this way: if your player characters went into a tomb or a crypt or catacombs or whatever, and they ran into a skeleton, and they brought that story back up to the tavern above town, they shouldn't be believed at all. It should be seen as a campfire story altogether, or maybe like this tall tale, this fish tale, like the fish was this big, but it was actually that big. You didn't see skeletons get up and walk around. You saw shadows flickering in your torches. You know, if a skeleton got up and walked around, it should challenge the worldview of an NPC. So let's say they send a witness back down. Let's say they hire some. Okay, you're so scared. Let's send Bartholomew down there. He can carry a torch for you guys, and if you really need the extra help. And so he goes down there, and he should be terrified by what is happening. It should challenge his worldview, not only in terms of the threat of a skeleton coming at him to kill him, but more in the terms of this shouldn't happen. There is a pile of bones walking around. Why? It shouldn't be possible. It should challenge him on a metaphysical level. It should challenge his philosophy or his religion. It should challenge his understanding of the world from a physics perspective. It shouldn't happen, but it is. And it's the same with a zombie or a ghoul or a ghast. And the threat should be such a way that how do you deal with that? This is a power that is beyond your control. How do you fix the problem? So oftentimes people will start turning towards the church. This now gives your church or temple or whatever religious body another reason to exist. I'm a big fan of the cleric tongue tie. I'm a big fan of the cleric class specifically because they are essentially professional undead hunters. They are a class that is specifically made to deal with undead. They have the turn the undead ability. They have many spells that combat the much more negative magic of some of the more advanced undead. Things like, now, for those of you who are more modern players, you probably don't know, but in these older systems and their retro clones, undead possess the ability to drain an entire hit dice away, to take away an entire level from your character. It wasn't necessarily the flat damage that the attack would do, simply the touch would just drain away part of the life force of your character. That's a little lost on us today because such an ability has been nerfed. Most of the time, it's taking away some, I think, constitution or strength or something like that. Something that probably doesn't even matter to a lot of classes anyway. But back then, it meant a lot more. This could conceivably kill you within 1 or 2 rounds, especially if you're a low level party. If that thing merely touched you, you were done. If you're level 1, you're up against a wraith. He's going to reach out and you're done, and you're going to become a wraith. That should be terrifying. And so, how do we explain these things coming about? Well, obviously, I brought up negative magic. So, of course, necromancy, that kind of thing. I'm a big fan, especially when we're talking about something like race, of the spirit being so bloodthirsty in life that came back, like it never truly died. A curse was placed upon him by like a magician or a cleric or whatever. Like, you'll never have eternal rest and this, that, and everything. You will spend eternity guarding your very tomb or something like that. Now, this gives you also a reason for things like the light spell to exist, because wraiths cannot stand light. Same with wights. And so we should be building these adventures up to be not only challenging, because that is, we should have high stakes and make it challenging, but we should, especially if we're going for a particular feeling, we should be trying to approach it from the idea that the dead shouldn't walk. None of this stuff should exist. It's one thing to see a goblin above the surface, right? Because they reproduce, and I'm sure plenty of people have seen them. So when somebody says I've seen a goblin, it's more believable. But when somebody says I've seen the dead walk, it shouldn't be believable at all. The dead don't reproduce in that way. They need victims. They need somebody else to convert over into the undead legion. They need high powered dark magic to even exist. So, that kind of concept is really what can help you in your games. And this gives you potential to come up with, if you're somebody that likes necromancy, there's necromancy. Somebody that is like an evil cleric of a dark occult forbidden religion, this follower of a god that is just evil. Like this gives you an opportunity to introduce something like that. This like the black dark temple that's located somewhere else. Something akin to people like having a Sauron character. Well, you can have a Sauron character, but he's I would kind of stray away from like making him so mythical. That's kind of like boring and railroady in a game like that, and especially from like having a big bad evil guy. I'm not a big fan of having those. Instead, I like to introduce potential obstacles and treat any antagonists more like obstacles to overcome. So nothing to come up with like this big railroady adventure, but rather have this other part of the cast that's on the other side of the curtain awaiting for their moment to come out on the stage. So you can have somebody like that. You can have like a magical item that has brought the dead back to life, and now they don't know why. There could be this curse. How do we break the curse? But in all things, it should be difficult for the players to overcome. They shouldn't have a simple answer to figure out how to keep this from happening, how to put a stop to what this is, how to make sure that the dead stay dead. This should not have an easy answer. Most modern day game masters or dungeon masters, whatever term you wish to use, have this approach of you just go in, you slay them, there you go, and then you got to get the MacGuffin, and there you blah blah blah. It's a very cut and dry kind of approach, and I'm not a fan of that approach. I'm sorry. Instead, my approach should be that the origins of these corpses coming back to life is mysterious, and it's up to the players to figure out, number one, how it happened, and B, how, if they even can, solve this problem. As always, thank you guys for listening. It's been almost 14 minutes, so take care. God bless. I'll see you on the other side.